This is Leaders in the Trenches, and your host today is Gene Hammett.
Hi, my name is Gene Hammett. I'm the host of Leaders in the Trenches, and my big question for you today is, how could you get all of your work done in 32 hours? That means not just you, but everyone on your team. The whole company had a 32-hour work rule. You're probably thinking to yourself, that's impossible. We are barely hanging on, and we're working more than 40. We're probably working 50 and 60, and you're probably working weekends. Well, I know what it's like because I run businesses too, and I work with a lot of companies that could never get it done in 32 hours. So they think. But I wanted to think about how this could really be done, so I went out there and found someone who is doing it. And I saw this come over my email, and I was like, that's an interesting story, because we think that we need to work longer to get the work done. We think we need 40 hours. We think we need, to work on weekends. The reality is, when you really get focused, you can get a lot more done in a shorter amount of time, and the work will, expand to fit the time at which you have available. So if you only had 32 hours, you would imagine you have to work really focused, and the ability to do that may seem impossible. So I went out there and found someone who's doing it. And so we have the co-founder of Wildbit. We have Natalie Nagele. Natalie just is impressive because they're willing to try new things. They're willing to push the boundaries of all kinds of stuff in the company to figure out what works for them. And the 32-hour work week was one of the biggest things that they've done in these tests to really align the company and align the work and really create something amazing. So I'm going to share that interview with you today. Before we get there, I have a big announcement. You may not know this, but Leaders in the Trenches is no more. This is the last episode. It doesn't pain me because we're actually reimagining the show, and we're really coming up with a series of interviews with fast growth companies that will help you grow as a leader. So I'm only interviewing people from the Inc. 500. If you don't know what that is, that's the fastest growing privately held companies in the United States. And they really are growing at really fast levels. It's insane how fast some of them are growing. I've had dozens and dozens of interviews already, and that's not an exaggeration because I'm so excited about this. I've had days stacked up with these meetings with these Inc. 500 level leaders, many of them in the top 50. And so we're going to be looking at the leadership strategies, the culture strategies, and specific elements that allow them to grow that fast. So you'll tune in not to Leaders in the Trenches, but you'll be tuning in to Growth Think Tank. That is something that I've been excited to tell you about. And here we are. We've reached the day. So the next episode will be Growth Think Tank. It may still say Leaders in the Trenches on the bottom of your URL if you even look at that. But if you're subscribed to this, you'll continue to get this. We're going to change the name. We're going to change the artwork. We're going to change the show format. But what's really going to stay the same is I'm still your host, and we're still going to be interviewing some amazing people. It's just specifically targeted at the leaders, founders, CEOs of the Inc. 500. So stay tuned for that reinvention of the show, and it's called Growth Think Tank. So you're not at the wrong place when you see that next week. But now here's the interview with Natalie. Hi, Natalie. How are you?
I'm well. How are you?
I'm great. Glad to have you here at Leaders in the Trenches.
Thank you. I'm excited to be here.
Well, I have been talking to you about, the business. I've been doing some research on this. I've already shared with the audience a little bit about you. So I would love for you to share us about who you are and who you serve at Wildbit.
Yeah, absolutely. So I am co-founder and CEO of Wildbit. We are an 18-year-old bootstrapped, profitable, growing company. We build our own products that support other software development teams. And we kind of just try to solve problems that make the life of a software developer better and more enjoyable. We have a product called Postmark, which sends all your transactional emails, password resets, welcome emails, comment notifications, that kind of thing. And we actually have a new product that just launched last week called conveyor.com. And it's a new workflow for development teams that we're super excited about, getting lots of really great feedback. So that's us.
Well, how many employees do you have?
We're 30.
So you said 18 years?
Yeah.
That's a lot. Did it start out just you? And
it actually started out I run the business with my husband, Chris. And so it's like I call it a mom and pop shop. And Chris started it when he was 20 years old, and we've been together 15 of those 18 years. So he started, and it was consulting early on, and totally different business now, but that's kind of how it got its legs.
Well, I can appreciate that. My wife also works with me. She's the CEO of the company. I don't know, many people don't know that, but we're a women-owned business for some strategic reasons, but also she filled out the paperwork, and now she's the CEO of our enterprise.
That's great.
Natalie, I get a lot of pitches, and I don't say this to brag, but I get probably 150 a month, and I rarely ever take any. Yours stood out to me, and I think it came through someone on your team or whoever it came through, as some of the unique things you're doing inside of your work. And so that uniqueness is the reason why you're here.
Cool.
Fair to say?
I love it. Yeah.
Well, most of the pitches, and I understand everyone wants to get their message out there, but they're not doing anything that's very different than others, right? So, one of the things I think that picked up on you is you're willing to test how you work together with your team to better produce productivity, efficiency, and excellence, and all of these things. So where did this whole concept of testing come?
I think we've been focused for a really long time on figuring out what works for us and not necessarily following in the footsteps or the shadows of other companies that come before us. We absolutely, love to check out how people are doing things and use other experiences as a framework. But for Chris and I, it has always been kind of a push to say what works for Wildbit. And that's, in our development process, and not really following some specific methodology and sitting down and saying every year on retreat, okay, how's this working? How's that working? Where are we today? What does the company look like today? Not, and the next year it'll look different, and we'll adjust. So I think we've been constantly testing it, because ultimately what we care about is how everything works together with the current team, with the current product, in its state, right? We've been around for 18 years. Things look a lot different last year than it did 2 years ago and 5 years ago, and all these things. So I just think it's just a natural part of being an entrepreneur. That's like, what's next? How can we continue to evolve? And not out of the necessity of just playing for playing's sake, but really to try to understand what is really what are the changes that are impactful to make us work better together, if that makes sense.
I want to ask you specifically, and I'm trying not to lead this because there's so many things I was interested about, but what has been your favorite test about the way you work over the last year or two?
Yeah, so we run a 32-hour work week or a 4-day work week, and that's absolutely been my most exciting and proud experiment. So Wildbit, we started this it'll be 2 years in May, and it's what kind of kicked off as a 4-day work week. And the whole team works 32 hours, and we just have been running it for these almost 2 years and seeing some really positive effects, adjusting and playing with the concept and experimenting with it. But it's just been a joy and a real adventure to try to see what we can do with less time. Can we work better? Can we work smarter? What is the impact on the quality of work when you have more rest in between, work and stuff like that? So it's just been a huge success, I would say, and a real adventure for us, and kind of as our small little team gets to experiment and play.
I want to get to the heart of this. And this came up, it probably was kicked around for a little while before you actually instituted, right?
Yeah, for sure.
And you have these retreats. You said, is it yearly a retreat?
Yeah, we do an annual retreat. Yep.
And it probably came up for a while. How long did it come up for before you actually instituted?
So I think, we started off with, funny enough, a 40-hour work week, which was, I think kind of crazy that you have to state that, but it was basically like, hey guys, we're working 40 hours a week, not more than that. And then we had flexible hours, which was basically the idea that, life happens between 9 and 5. And so you want to make sure that you have opportunities to do other things. And so you kind of work when works for you and your team. And so I think there's been like these pieces that have been slowly building onto it. The final straw was after I read a book called Deep Work by Cal Newport. And in Cal's book, he talks a lot about the brain's capacity for actual deep, meaningful work, right? And the max capacity, they say, is about 4 hours a day. So, that was a big aha moment that I brought to the team and said, well, hold on a second. If we can only do 4 times 5 is 20, what the hell are we doing for the other 20 hours? And so, that really started a dialogue. And I don't know if I can say specifically when that hit and when we actually executed on it, but we started really internally talking about, well, what's the worst thing that could happen, right? And that's how I run the business. Chris and I are always like, what's the worst case, right? Because some reason my mind works better when I'm like, show me the bad stuff. And it's like, when the bad stuff doesn't look so bad, then we can play around with the rest of it.
What was one of the worst things that you thought could happen?
Genuinely, that it wouldn't work and the reverting of it would have a negative impact on the team and the culture. That's my biggest fear, for sure. Like, you implement it for a while and then all of a sudden you're like, all right, we're back to 5 days. And people are like, oh my God, you're ruining my life.
How dare you?
I know, but my team's not like that. So like it's a fear, I guess, theoretically. It's probably more a fear as we add new people on than the people who have been with us since we started the whole project. Cause I think we all was like, this is weird. Are we really going to do this?
I was looking for my book and I don't have a copy of it here. I've got a chapter in there about test the essential. And it really is about looking at everything as a test. And then I have another chapter on fears where being able to distinguish between a rational fear and an irrational fear. And what you had was a little bit irrational, right? It's not founded. The example is swimming with a great white shark is a real fear. Like, I'm deathly afraid of these beautiful animals that will eat you in shreds. But you had to overcome these fears. So is your way of doing that naturally to think about what's the worst case that happened and maybe do some risk mitigation around that?
Yeah, I think it's just always been that way. I maybe because I feel like I work best with my back against the wall. It's just like where it's where I thrive. And so that back against the wall translates into like worst case scenarios, right? Like, and so I think we just think through, and this one kind of when I talk to my team about anything, it's like, all right, we'll just walk it through, right? Let's put all the cards on the table. And usually none of them are that bad once you kind of like lay them out. And it's when they're scarier when they're in your head and they start creating these dialogues and narratives that probably aren't accurate once you kind of play it out. So I just think that's just kind of where we play. But again, we're bootstrap profitable, completely independent. We have nobody to answer to. So most of the time our risks are really small because so we play and then it doesn't work and then we try something else. And who's going to tell me that it was wrong?
Well, I think a lot of people think about this 4-day work week would immediately go to, oh, we get the 40 hours inside of 4 days. But you guys took a different approach. You said, no, we're going to stick with a standard 32-hour work week. And you've got some, because you want to have coverage on Mondays and Fridays. Not everybody can take off on Fridays. Right. Tell us how you work through those issues.
Yeah. So, support, we're not going to tell our customers we're not working on Fridays if they need something. So our support team, our customer success team alternates Mondays and Fridays. So they still get 3 consecutive days. And that's been working really well. And then we obviously have on-call schedules. I mean, we have infrastructure products. We're constantly paying attention to making sure that they're available and reliable. And I think, honestly, I think where I'm headed with it is more of that 32 hours and less the 4-day work week. I'm not convinced yet that like a full day off is the right solution. I'm playing with the idea that, shorter days might be a better solution because again, like how much of your mind can you, use in those 8 hours? And we have a retreat coming up in May and I think that's what we'll spend some time thinking about. But the ultimate goal of less time is really important. And the quality of work on Monday morning, like people run to the office on Monday mornings, and it's like, I run to the office. I'm so like, can't wait to get to work. And I think that's an unusual thing, with what we do.
And I'm looking for my other prop here, and I don't seem to have any, but I have these stickers that say, I love Mondays.
Yeah.
And a lot of founders I know love Mondays, but the problem is not a lot of employees love Mondays.
Well, one thing we did is we got rid of most of our Monday meetings.
Okay.
So because I think one of the big problems, and we used to hate Mondays. I'm like, oh my God, Monday is my like meet with everybody day. And I'm like, that's a horrible way to start a week. I want to start a week fresh. And on that fresh mind, I want to do great work. And then we can, so our lead call is on Thursdays. I love that. I think that's great. It's our last day, last morning. we can kind of clean up the week. But Mondays for most of the team is maybe a 30-minute meeting. We try to do it like early, kind of at a time that works for a remote team. And that's it. And hopefully the rest of your day is work on a clear head, right? You really start to see the quality of work that comes out, and it's really impressive.
Natalie, I used to feel guilt, and I'm going to share this with you in the audience, when I would work a full day and it would get to be 6:00 at night and I didn't feel like I could keep going. I didn't feel like I had the creative energy from it. And I had a lot of stuff still left to do. And a lot of the work I do, writing for Inc. magazine and working with clients, takes a real fresh mind. And I finally let go of that guilt.
Yeah.
Have you ever had experienced any kind of guilt associated to not working enough hours?
Absolutely. I think the guilt that I have, and I know other people have on my team, that we try to work through, is that guilt that not even 6, it's 3:00 and you can't get anything else done. Right. I mean, those are real, like there's days when I'm solving a challenging problem in the morning, or I have 3 meetings in a row, and they're like deep, meaningful conversations. It's like, I've got nothing. The juice is gone. And I've learned over the years that it really is gone. Like there is a finite, I'm not going to dig it up. There's no hack, there's nothing I can do. And so, those are realities. I mean, we did the flexible working hours for that purpose. There was a point where I realized that we built, like, our culture somehow demanded that, like, it's 4:00 and you're sitting staring at your computer until 5 to get up and leave. And that just killed me. And I was like, no, please, go home. Like, if you're spent and you had a great day, like, ultimately my goal is I don't even count hours. I don't give it, I don't care if it's 32 hours. If you can get work done that we think is enough in 20 hours, that's fantastic. If you can find, I still think there's so much productivity gain, not that productivity is the end goal, but there's so much productivity gain still to be had. And as we understand our brains better, as we understand ourselves as individuals better, where and how we structure that time, and the better we get. And as individuals, I have some individuals on my team who are spectacular at that and some who struggle. Right. And so the better we get at that as individuals, the more I'm like, do what you got to do. Like, let's commit to what we want to accomplish. You set out and you accomplish it. And hopefully it's in less than 32 hours. And that's a huge win.
Natalie, you did another test I want to bring up. I'm going to guide you on this one because I think it's really interesting. We are all overloaded with communication, and I have a lot of clients. I use Slack within my team, and it's very distracting at times. It's very difficult. You feel like you need to be there. And I work with a lot of companies that are just completely tied to the way Slack has run their business. Now, it is a useful tool. It's better than email. You guys went a full week with a very limited use of Slack. Explain to us, this test that you started to run.
Yeah, so we shut down Slack. We do this periodically. I think that was the one that Chris actually wrote about, but we are constantly maximizing focus time and focus work. So Slack is horrendous. And it's not Slack, right? Like, it's just chat in general, right? There was chats before Slack. There'll be chats after Slack. And it's the requirement for an instant communication. I think Slack has become so ingrained in its perception that it's a place for permanent storage of information. And we don't look at it that way, right? So one of the first things we did is, like, Slack can't be an inbox. So Slack is like direct, need something now, quick, like you and I just chatting. But if we're making decisions or doing anything, it doesn't live in Slack. Nobody should feel like they have to go back to Slack to check what they missed. Because that's like the worst thing in the world, is when you're like, oh my God, did I miss something? And it's like, no. And it's not organized. There's a million things, but we shut it down partially because sometimes you have to, like, swing pendulums really drastically on the other side to see what's going to fall apart. And I think that's kind of, you do something for long enough, you almost need to do that again, right? Just like you should always sign up for your app every couple of times, a year, like sign up from scratch, because you forget the things that you built and maybe they're not relevant anymore. I think the same in process. You kind of want to, like, break things a little bit to see what's going to hurt. And so we shut it down and we left it enabled for direct message, because we're a fully remote team. Well, we're remote first. And so, we still need some means of, like, talking directly to each other, working on projects, but no group chats, none of that stuff. And it was so fun because, we removed the water cooler And it's kind of stayed permanently removed because on a remote team in different time zones, a Slack water cooler is not valuable. You get like this all day long hi, be right back, bye, leave it. It's like we're not connecting. You have to have what I call the intentional water cooler if you actually want to have like that connection with your team. But one of my favorite things that we identified, and there was Ashley on our team, was like, I realized how much I went back to Slack as a procrastination tool. And she's like, I realized, like, I was like, oh, I'm going to switch back to Slack. We don't have Slack. And I was like, what am I going to do? Oh, I guess I'll go take a walk. And I mean, I don't have to explain how much more valuable it is to take a walk than it is to like read through every Slack channel to see if you missed something. That was very powerful and very impactful on the team, because we really, your best work, we say your best work is done away from the screen. And so having any opportunity to walk away, to not feel like you can just switch. I mean, it became a crutch, right? It's like, oh, I'm in between tasks, or this thing gets hard, and that part of your brain's like, I need a quick fix. And if Slack's the best quick fix you can get. So, switching to that. So it was really impactful. Our Slack is really quiet now, which I really like. But, we all start easing into bad habits again. And I'm sure we're going to do something on retreat in May where we say, all right, killing something. We're going to get rid of something for a little bit to just give that jolt, to remind ourselves, where things fall apart. What are we missing? It was really great.
I like the way you're willing to break some things and remove it and challenge yourself to, how would we do this if we didn't have this channel or tool or whatever was in front of us. You work with a lot of developers, not only within your team, but also you serve a lot of developers, right? So a lot of their best work is not done when they're sitting there typing at keyboards. It's the thinking process.
Absolutely. And it's one of those things, I think it's such a misconception, or just software development is solving complicated problems. Once you write the code, that's the easy part. Like our team, like if you talk to the engineering team, it's like they always say, it's the writing, it's the drawing, it's the schematics, it's the taking a walk. It's, sometimes it's like spending the whole weekend letting it ruminate in the back of your mind. And you come in, I always laugh, like we have people who watch YouTube while they're coding, or listen to like really aggressive music while they're coding. And I'm always laughing. I'm like, how do you do that? Because my job is writing and thinking. They're like, when I code, I'm not really thinking. Like I solved the problem already. Now I just have to execute on it. And I think that's really important for really quality software development. I mean, we're solving problems, right? We're taking pieces and architecting them to understand how they fit together, to future-proof them to some degree so that they don't break something else down the line. And we all know it's not like 1 + 1 = 2, right? There's a million ways to get to 2. So how do you architect it and build it in a way? And I think I have a team of folks who really understand that, and hopefully Wildbit supports them in that, like, walk away from your computer, like that's not the most important thing.
Natalie, I want to give you a chance. I've been asking and guiding these things through questions. What have I not asked you about today that you think other company leaders really need to understand if they would love to embrace a little bit more of the testing inside of their culture?
I think the most important thing is trusting your team. I mean, when we implemented the 32-hour work week, I lean a lot on my team, and I'm very vulnerable, and I'll say, here's these things that I'm thinking about. What are the risks? What haven't we thought about? And what happens if we fall down? Are we going to be able to pick ourselves back up? And what's that going to look like? And that's been something that we've really pushed a lot, is, our own vulnerabilities as leaders, and also our trust in our team to help guide those directions. Because what happens is, when we first implemented the 32-hour work week, in the first few weeks, I kept asking the team, how you feeling? And my team was like, we can't do this. We're not getting enough done. They had such an anxiety, and that's like a powerful thing when people they care about their work. They care about the company. They care about growth. And they're like, whoa, we can't do this. And that's an incredible trust, right? So now as we're pushing along and really trying to identify those things, I really rely on that trust with my team to help guide the experiments. So I trust them to protect me in case we have to switch back or change things. And they know that we're vulnerable enough to hear honesty from them around what's working, what's not working. And that, that's hard to build. I've talked to teams who have, over this last 2 years, I've tried to meet as many teams as I can that run 32-hour work weeks so we can kind of share how it's going. And I've talked to teams where they're like, we're being taken advantage of. Nobody's getting, now our 32 hours turned into 20, and I've had those conversations, and it's shocking to me because I just don't have that culture inside the company. Like we really have, I'm so lucky to work with great people who really care. And so they look at these things as parts of the same puzzle as how I look at it. How are we going to get better? How do we execute better? How do we create a better work environment? And so I think that trust is really important.
I want to ask one follow-up question to this before we wrap up. I believe that when you are building a good culture, you have good processes for hiring. If you have these great people, what have you learned or tested in the hiring process that you can share with us today?
Goodness, I'm not great at it. I promise. I think we don't do it very often. We're a small team. And so we've had some real fantastic successes, and we've had some failures. I think we try very hard to take our time and really, really set clear expectations and ask a lot of questions. And I try to understand motives of why people want to come join the organization. And I'm not, anybody who knows me and who follows Wildbit knows that I'm equal. I understand that people get a job for a job because they need to support their families in an equal way that they do it for their own motivations and their own kind of fulfillment in their career. So I find both of those equally as important, but they're equally as important. And so I really try to understand people's motivations, and the risk that I've found with the more and more our culture becomes known, our 32-hour work weeks, our flexible schedules, the remote first, all these things, the more I'm realizing that some folks just want to come work here because of those things. And that's going to be a struggle for them because our team isn't here for those things, right? We're here to do really good work and work collaboratively together and experiment on what it means to build a great business. And some of that comes out as a 32-hour work week, but that might change, and all these things. And so I've had to learn how to balance the desire to work for Wildbit because of the problems we're solving in the team and the kind of career development that we hope to provide. And this kind of, I really want to work in this culture, and that's the most important thing. And that's been really a struggle for me. And, I don't know that I've solved it yet because I want to hire everybody, but I can't. So it's like kind of finding that balance.
Well, I appreciate you sharing that with us. Natalie, thanks for being here at Leaders in the Trenches and sharing your insights on how you test your way to success. So I appreciate it.
Thanks for having me out. This was fun.
Wow. What a great interview. 32 hours a week. It is possible. It is possible to create that level of focus and energy around 32 hours and get the work done. Natalie has proven it, and you could probably do some things that you didn't think were possible if you really, really sat down to do it. So I mentioned at the very beginning of this, maybe you skipped past it or not, but we are taking Leaders in the Trenches offline. It is over. After 5 and almost a half years, almost 440 episodes, there's no more Leaders in the Trenches. I have reimagined the name, reimagined the format, reimagined the guest, and so it will be called Growth Think Tank going forward. We're going to be interviewing the fastest growing companies, the founders and CEOs of the Inc. 500. We're going to be talking about the leadership and culture strategies that allow them to grow so fast. It's a new format, so tune in. And you're not in the wrong place if you get it. If you haven't listened this far, then I guess it doesn't matter. But I'm excited to share this with you, and I'm excited to bring you along for this journey because I've already done 22 of these interviews, and they are amazing. We're getting very specific. We're getting just the most powerful elements, and I'm going to share that with you on the show. So tune in next week for a new format, new show, Growth Think Tank. And as always, lead with courage. I'll see you next time.